the hunger fix, which says fatty and salty foods are drugs like cocaine and meth and need to be kept away from kids. Dr. Pam Peeke, who teaches medicine at the University of Maryland, actually believes that food is like coke and meth?
No, not food, just certain foods. And
salty, fatty foods.
Well, no, sugary, fatty, salty foods that have been studied by world-class scientists now at the National Institutes of Health. But what's also fascinating here was what to do with all that. I'm going to tell you something, John. I've been Stosselized about this. Absolutely.
What does that mean?
I went through a Stosselification because I've been thinking about this and what is the role of, for instance, government when you find out that in certain people, when you have exposure to a lot of these refined processed foods, I'm not talking about apples and oranges and tuna and the rest of it, I'm talking about the other stuff, that in certain people, it really, you know, based upon very credible brain scans and excellent work, it really works on the brain and the reward center, just like, for instance, coke, meth, alcohol, and any other addiction.
Lights up in the brain.
You got it. Now, when that happens, you know, you got yourself a situation where you have an impaired ability to be able to make a choice that's good for you. Ask someone who's just, you know, an alcoholic who's just down 2 bottles of wine, you know, hey, and, you know, why don't you just do a little moderation right now? Well, you can't because, you know, you're in full-on addiction. So what do? Should the government have a role in any of this? Okay, you ready? No.
Really? This is how you've been Stosselized?
I've been Stosselized.
Since we last had a debate about it?
Absolutely.
I invited you on this show.
I grew up.
Because you're the bad guy. You said in your
I've
book.
Been transformed.
You say in your book, government needs to educate people immediately.
Educate. I said educate.
Treat these foods as addictive substances.
Well, people need to understand that certain people are very, very susceptible to this. But here's what you need to do. If you take, let's just take that bottle of nasty stuff there. Okay, so let's just say we take that right there. All right? All right. If you say that I can't have a 16-ounce, what am I going to do if I have an issue like food addiction? Honey, I'm going to score it some other way. You could charge me. You can, you know, make me run around with 8 ounces instead of 16 ounces. But somehow I'm going to score this thing. And you can't do a thing about that.
All right, so you're against Mayor Bloomberg's ridiculous soda size thing, but you do say in your book, make free programs available to get people to detox and get off these foods.
But I didn't say it was government. I said, can we have programs? You know what the free programs are? There are. They're already in existence right now. And they're all done by private organizations. We have Overeaters Anonymous. We have Food Addicts Anonymous.
Oh, not government.
No,
okay.
It had nothing to do with government. These are all free. They don't cost a dime.
Okay.
And we actually agree about that. I told you I was Stosselized.
I'm just delighted.
Really?
How about the other issue that I'm told there are food deserts where poor people live, and therefore Michelle Obama says we have to invite supermarkets in there, give them tax breaks or maybe pay for it because they can't get fresh food, and that's why poor people are fat.
Well, John, you know, ever since, you know, that original myth came out about the food deserts, we found out that by doing research that it really wasn't true at all.
Oops, there are just as many supermarkets in those areas.
Yeah, and they actually do have the supermarkets. You still do have a choice, and we're right back to where we go again. You know what it really is? I want a ground surge of citizens out there who are just highly enlightened about this, who can finally get on out and do something for themselves. They're the ones with the choice here, and they need to be doing that for their families as well.
All voluntary.
Nutritionists.
Dr. Peeke, thank you. May you all be Stosselized and celebrate freedom. We're back now with your comments or questions for my guest, Dr. Pamela Peeke, who says you can be addicted to food like people are addicted to cocaine. Yes, sir.
What is the idea of an empty calorie, and are they maybe more addicting than healthy calories?
Usually the empty calories are the refined processed calories. You take something perfectly fine like cane sugar and you beat it to death, process it, and spit it out as some plant, I mean manufacturing plant, and it suddenly went from some dark, wonderful food that was a whole food, and now suddenly it's refined sugar. And it's got basically no major nutrients other than the fact that it gives you a little bit of energy. That's all it does.
So what? We're eating more of this stuff all the time and we're living longer.
You want to know something? It's all about choice. If you want to have a little bit of that empty calorie on top of a cookie, knock yourself out, so long as it doesn't, hit you into a bender and you end up eating everything that's not tacked down around you, because in some people, they do that. You just have to use your own common sense. You know your body better than anybody knows.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Tia, what you were saying, your ideal diet kind of sounded in line with what I've heard about the paleo diet. Is that something that you're advocating?
You know, it's interesting. I think the labels are always a little bit confusing. I think what I would say in respect to myself is what I figured out was I had a pretty significant intolerance to most of the foods I was eating. And what I eat today probably looks a lot like what someone consumed in a Paleolithic time, though I don't particularly adhere to a certain set of rules that, some might say. I'll give you one example. I think a hardcore paleo person would probably advocate that dairy doesn't make sense in a Paleolithic diet. And I have found that for me, though I've found for many others, dairy does really well. So it's really comes back to this theme I think we're hearing, that at the individual level we got to kind of figure out what works for us, but it's really good to have science that informs that so that you're making kind of a reasonable starting guess as to where to go.
There's one tiny little glitch to that, and that is you're a guy. And women, when they've been studied with these kinds of dietary intakes, have had a little bit more trouble because women are a little bit more carbohydrate attracted. And therefore, they'll last about, several weeks or so, if even that long, on a strict diet very much like this, which is very high fat and actually only takes in about 10% carbohydrate. Women, after a while, kind of start bumping it up a little bit. A lot of this has to do with our own blueprint and our own makeup. So when you look at the research, what we haven't seen enough of is the gender differentiations and what we can now do to be able to help you and customize that based upon gender.
On that note, thank you all.